Have you ever seen a great plan fail? Or maybe you have a good idea and you're wondering how to get it implemented. Today, we're going to be talking about how we move from idea to planning to action.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Today we're talking about moving a plan into action with enthusiasm, confidence, and ease. I'm Peta Blakely. Welcome to Coffee Time. I am joined today by my colleagues Cynthia Rojas and Rebecca Tuttle. Good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. It's a little dark in here, feels like.
Good morning.
Okay.
It's bright in here.
I can see you clearly, yeah.
Good. So today we're going to be talking about all the ways that good ideas fail.
Yeah. One of my favorite topics, but if you watch the show, you know that I say that a lot. But implementation.
Yeah.
Right? So we've been talking about adapting, and implementation is about adopting, right? So how do you get it done?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's, that this is the part that we often forget about, right? We put a lot of energy into having great ideas and writing plans, and then they just kind of fizzle, like nothing happens. So let's talk about why that happens. And I think one of the first reasons that happens is there's not enough enthusiasm to overcome the inertia. Is that a good way to put it?
I think so. I think that we forget, and you're right, Peter. We think that the plan is the destination. The plan is the beginning, right? So I see this a lot with strategic planning. Organizations will spend money to bring in someone to plan, and they will put tons of resources. And then at the end, there's a big retreat and a great celebration. And then they come to me and they're like, how do we implement this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this was not the end. This was the beginning of what is a much longer journey. So even just changing your mind from that perspective and seeing implementation as the true beginning of your journey.
Yeah.
Not the, not an afterthought.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's a lot. I see that a lot, actually, the point about the implementation. And I think that's just a lack of understanding that follows the process of strategic planning. I see that all the time is, okay, we have this great document all charged up, and now what do we do with it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I hope from this show, from this discussion, that those listening that are bringing about strategic planning, that they remember to ask about that, or that they are proactive in that regard. And I hope on the other side, the facilitator remembers to remind their group that there is still more work to be done.
Yeah. And it's there's an important distinction to be made between the plan and, okay, what do I do when I get back to my desk the next day, right? And I think that's where we stop. We have these like grand visions for what the organization as a whole is going to be doing, and then we don't have action steps for individuals, right?
Yeah. So you asked about enthusiasm, right?
Yeah.
How do we do this with enthusiasm? And if you're a leader who is struggling with implementation, you should do some research on the speech that JFK did when he was trying to convince Congress to invest in sending a person to the moon. It's one of the greatest speeches, there are many, and it's been dissected in terms of how do you inspire a nation that actually was not inspired to go to the moon. And if you remember, Russia got there first. So there was a lot of, well, why now when there's so much money? But enthusiasm is generated by letting people know how their life is going to be better. So a lot of times, one thing I also see is that there's a huge focus on what the implementation is, like what they're doing, the technical side of that.
Mhm.
But you haven't yet told me how my life is going to be better. Or maybe
Yeah.
you have, but not in a way that inspires me. So I see this a lot when organizations implement technology. Well, it's going to make my work more efficient. Okay, but how?
Right.
Like really think about what are the words and what are the metaphors that we can use to inspire people.
Mhm. Right. And how in the, mission-based field, how is this going to help us serve our mission better, right? Be
Yeah.
more proud of how we're showing up in the community, things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the best ways to do it to really drive at motivating people is interview people before you embark on an initiative
Yeah.
and see like what's their vision, what are their needs, so that you can then use those same points when you're talking about the change that's going to happen. Because remember, and we talked about change recently, that um, change is about loss, right?
Yeah.
So if you're implementing something new, you're probably getting rid of something old,
Yeah.
and your staff are dealing with loss. So
Mhm.
you have a double whammy there.
And that's a really good point. And I think when we're doing our planning processes, we tend to gloss over, what are we giving up? And in stifling that conversation in the planning process, it bubbles up in the implementation process when people just don't give up whatever they needed to make this happen, right?
Yeah.
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 I think another, another place that I've seen them fail is a lack of clear objectives,
Mhm.
right? It all looks like this really great grand vision, but we're not sure how we're going to know that we're making progress and when, right? What is this really going to look like in
Yeah.
the day to day? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have an example of that, Peter?
So, we're going to serve 100 people this year. That sounds fantastic. But if we don't have any intermediate steps, so in January, we're going to outreach to 500 people with a brochure, right? And in February, we're going to make this number of phone calls. And in March, we're going to have this many meetings. You end up just like any New Year's resolution, it's December and it's too late, right?
Yeah.
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 So, right. So I think like the long-term result being really, really, really clearly articulated, and then intermediate steps and new behaviors, right? So does that mean I'm going to make 2 phone calls every day, like something really, really distinct and measurable, right? Has to be articulated so that people can, grab it and say, oh, okay, that's not as impossible as it sounds. I can commit to making 2 phone calls a day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When we review federal grants, that's the one thing we pay the closest attention to are the objectives. Are they measurable, realistic, and attainable? And if you don't have clear objectives to carry out the project, then your score is significantly impacted. And I think where a lot of people, writers, fall short in objectives is they don't really understand the difference between goals and objectives. Do you think it would help you if you clarified that just for a moment?
I think it would help if you clarified that, because I don't understand the difference between goals and objectives. And that's one of the reasons that I never use the word goals, but that's for another show.
Right.
Yeah.
I look at goals as though, so we have a mission for our show, and then what's the goal for Coffee Time with Masterminds? The goal may be to provide information for listeners on mission-based organizations, right? I'm just paraphrasing quickly.
Yeah.
And the objectives are, how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to show up every Friday at 10:30. We're going to bring guest speakers in for this particular topic on this particular date. You can measure a goal. Did we get there? But the objectives are, did we attain that? Did we accomplish what we were going to say? I look at it like a ladder or stairs. And the goal is at the top, and each ring on the stair or ring on the ladder is one objective getting you closer to your goal.
So would you say that an objective is, one, something that we do, like it's internal, and two, something that we can, like it's clear when it's completed, right? Like it's clearly articulated and it has a time to it.
I would say yes, if you're using the right tools to monitor and make sure that it's completed. And that's why I love logic models. And I know you both do too.
Yeah.
Logic model queens.
I mean, that's, that's one of the things that I love about tools like logic models is like how satisfying is it to check that off, right? When you set a goal, like we're going to inform a whole lot of mission-based leaders on important stuff, it's really hard for us to know when we've attained that goal, right? But we can know that we are achieving those objectives, right? So that, I think that's really important, and it's really satisfying for people. It's also an opportunity to course correct. If the objective is not getting obtained, it's an opportunity to talk about whether it wasn't realistic, or we don't have the right tools to do it, or people aren't getting the resources that they need, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Cynthia.
I have a question. So we all do work with organizations that then need some sort of an implementation strategy.
Yep.
What might be some characteristics of an organization that will give you red flags that they're going to struggle with implementation? Because I think that conversation is just as helpful as what does it take to successfully implement something. So what might be some characteristics that an organization has that serves as red flags? This is going to be trouble.
A big one is the person who is leading the project doesn't have the authority or the influence to get it done. Right? So, if they keep taking our products to a whole bunch of other people and checking that it's okay, they're probably not going to be able to like drive forward the action steps to implement the project. And if that group of people keeps changing or growing, it's a sign that like, not only do they not have the influence, but they're getting like their influence is shrinking as they're working on this. So that's a huge red flag. If they are not if there are people who they know are going to be less enthusiastic, either because they face a significant loss as a result of this change, or just because they're like, that's just them. They're naturally skeptical people, right? And if they are avoiding them rather than embracing them in the conversation, that could be a red flag too, right? If you can get those people to, say early what the objections are, right? Help you portray the plan in a more realistic voice. I mean, the reality is if you go around selling something that is all sunshine and roses, nobody believes you, right? So let's get those negative Nellies, like incorporate their objections into your marketing. It's going to sound a lot more realistic, right?
Yeah.
And I would rather say, and a final one I think is a false sense of urgency. That tells me the entire project is masking some other problem, right?
I love that. Yeah. And we tend to approach things with urgency.
Right.
I think when I get wind that your staff are busy, like really busy, like they can't even have a meeting about the plan.
Yes.
Right. Or they come to a meeting and they complain about how busy they are.
Right.
for me, that is a huge red flag that you have deep organizational issues that need to be addressed. Your staff are burnt out, overworked, and adding this is just could potentially
Yeah.
take them over the edge.
Yeah.
On the fund development side, oftentimes it's a lack of understanding that,
Yep.
and we talked about this on another show, is, well, I'm just going to sit and keep my mouth shut because I don't understand, right? And so then the decisions will be made and I'm silent because of either, if I open my mouth, I might be embarrassed or humiliated, right? There's a lot of reasons why people are closed-lipped. But one is, I believe, lack of understanding, because now I reverse engineer everything. So when I was exposed to strategic planning, I reverse engineered it so that I could understand it.
Mhm.
And I think when we hear strategic planning, it sounds so sophisticated.
Yeah.
And if you have everyone involved at their layer of expertise in the process, I don't think you'll find that there will be those that don't understand it. The other is they're just not committed. And I think that, again, goes not buying in because I didn't feel part of the process, right?
Right.
And lastly, the resources are too thin for implementation. It came about that it was time, according to our bylaws, to do a strategic plan. Now we've done one, but it's just going to collect cobwebs because we don't have the next steps for implementation.
Yeah. Yep.
That's really difficult.
And I think what a lot of those things end up looking like is a plan that just gets absorbed by the day-to-day, right? So, whether it's because people don't have time to, if they don't have time to talk about it, they're probably not gonna have time to implement it, right? Or if they don't understand it, if they don't understand it, they're not gonna stop doing the work that they are comfortable and confident doing to do it. Right. So what it ends up looking like is just people doing their everyday work instead.
Yeah. So what if we started conversations at organizations with first, how are we going to implement this?
Yeah.
Start the conversation there before we get into the what is it that we're implementing, but really how we're going to do this. And if you have the bandwidth or you have the resources you need to do that, then you should probably move forward. I also want to welcome Renee. She's joined us. Nice to see you, Renee. And so, what if that was how these initiatives took off?
Yeah. Or what resources do you in particular have for this, right? Because I think the key, the reason so many of these initiatives die on the vine is that people don't have a specific and actionable responsibility, right? And everybody in the organization should have some responsibility, right? Something that they are putting into their workday every day to move this thing forward. So the conversation is not just, all right, so we're going to do this. It's, what do you have to offer to do this, right? What thing can you say right now? You've got the resources, you've got the time, you're doing this, you understand how it contributes to the larger vision, and you're comfortable like reporting to us every week in staff meeting that either that you've done it or what other resources you need to do it. So,
you have to have a reporting structure. I just want to highlight that if you're looking at us and you look within my box on my left, I don't know if it's your right, you see my cute little dog.
Oh, yes.
Oh, in the bed. I see.
Yeah, isn't that adorable?
It's being very good today.
Maybe this is what retreats become, and less about the team building only, which is still important, but maybe it's about the implementation and the team building to perform the implementation. And I wonder how strategic planning will change because COVID and the pandemic ruffled so many policies and procedures internally that we won't be seeing the same strategic plans. So I would look at this, a good leader would lead this by celebration of success, by all the things that we're talking about, inclusivity and equity. And I'm excited to see what strategic plans look like. I suspect they may go to the wayside from their typical structure.
I think one of the things that we learned through COVID was to plan in shorter cycles, right? Like things just aren't that certain. And making a 5-year plan, making a big strategic plan every 5 or 10 years, using up a whole lot of resources on it, spending a lot of energy on it. When the reality is, by the time you get to the end of that plan, half your staff is turned over, people weren't there to do it. And it might be wildly out of date because things are changing, right? So I think we're probably going to see mini plans, right? And more targeted plans as opposed to like massive organizational plans with really long life cycles.
Yeah, I was talking to someone the other day and they mentioned a 10-year plan. And I thought to myself, you know how many pandemics we're going to have?
Yeah, right. How on earth do you plan for 10 years from now?
Yeah, it's like, this is no.
No. Let's try to get through this year. Like, what is your plan for this year? I mean, how do you even know what the need is going to be?
Right. Yeah.
Well, that brings up a great point too, in that strategic planning is, in my experience and observation, been more of an internal exercise, but funders are requiring us as organizations to really, draw back the curtains so they can see more of the work and more of the need and experience of the people in the community. So I believe strategic planning going forward, especially when a funder requires it, is going to have more of that curtain drawn so you can see more of the external vision, the external need than just what internally how you're structuring it.
Yeah. And I want to
go ahead.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
I do want to say something. 20 years ago, I met this man. It's so funny. I met him once, never forgot him, never forgot his name either. And he said something that changed a lot for me. He said we were implementing a new electronic health record in our organization. Actually, we were going into, for the first time, we were going to start billing through this technology. And he said, technology does not change behavior. It enhances it. And he said, this is the mistake that organizations make. And I have to tell you, that was life-changing for me, because what I gather from that statement is, if you do not have the behavior, there is nothing you can do. There's no technology in the world that's going to help that, right? Yep. And I say this because when we think about implementation, we also have to think about what's the change in behavior that needs to occur. Because just saying that we're going to have this new program or I get a lot of organizations that want to implement an HR department. Well, that takes a change in behavior. And so looking at that, I think, is instrumental to making sure that you're successful.
This comes up in my work so much, where organizations say, we have no evaluation plan and we're not collecting any data. What database should we use? And I always say, like, well, let's start with your whiteboard. Like, you can all you can do is build. The best you could possibly do is build a database that supports a process that you have. So if you can't do this with a whiteboard or an Excel sheet, you are in no way ready for a database, right? Get that all built out, understand what you count, who counts it, where they put it, what the number looks like, what you do with it, right? And when you can explain all of that to your database designer, then you can get a database, right? But the database is not going to make you do data. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
I think what you're saying is start with what you have and where you're at.
Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
go and purchase a database no one knows how to use just to be more sophisticated. Start with where you're at, start with what you have, and if it's simplified, the likelihood of its survival, I believe, is greater.
I used to work for a guy who was a great leader who used to say, let's try a Trojan mouse, not an entire Trojan horse. That's too big and distracting. A Trojan mouse, right? So instead of making a huge elaborate plan and trying to get everybody on board with massive changes, like let's just do what we can do right now with the resources we have. Let's do one little step, and then if that works, we'll add another, right?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. It's interesting you said that about the database. I was working with an organization, and so I said, we're gonna enter the data into Excel spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't we just buy a database?
Because you don't know what to put in it yet.
I don't know the computer literacy of your staff. I don't know if your staff would even entertain putting their data. They've been doing it on paper forever.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would even use the computer. Like there's so many variables to making sure
Are
that
they even at computers? I mean, I see so many programs where most of the staff are in their cars, right, or out in the community all day, and then they get a database, and they say, why aren't people entering data from their cell phones? Right. I mean, if you expected people to come back to the office at the end of the day and do data entry, like that is a whole other conversation.
Right. And if you don't have behavior already, if you are not a deadline-driven organization, if you don't have a compliance team, but now you're going to start watching people's numbers, that takes some thinking.
And you didn't hire them, right? You hired those people because they're really great at building community. They're really good at building relationships with teenagers, right? And then you get upset with them because they're not good at data entry. It's not fair.
Yep.
Right. I mean, that's an example of trying to implement a plan that wasn't building on your organization's strengths, right? So, so maybe that's the other part, right? Not even with the best plan for implementation, some plans are not for you, right? Are not for your organization.
Yeah.
We have to take out that sentence in the job description that says other duties not assigned.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah.
From an HR perspective, no, you never want to take that sentence out. There's legal implications to that sentence. But I get it. I get what you're saying. We are close to wrapping up. I think we said a lot of things, but let's kind of hone it down. So what do leaders need for a successful implementation or execution of an initiative?
I mean, I think the big takeaway is recognize that implementation is a second step, right? More important than the planning phase.
Yes.
Yeah. Another one, I am always preaching about measurement, right? Measurable objectives, measurable activities, measurable outcomes. And one of the reasons for that is so that you can make corrections in real time. And so just like you measure the outcomes of your programs, you should be measuring the activities and the objectives and the outputs of your strategic plan, not so people can get in trouble, right? But just so that you can create a culture of talking about whether you achieved your objective and what other resources you're going to need to be able to achieve it, right? This needs to be a, hey guys, I need help conversation, not a, I'm going to be in trouble conversation, or nobody will do it, right? Yeah, you can't be building on the fear. And then I think the other part is recognize and articulate that this is on top of everybody's job.
Yes.
That we are going to have to be really thoughtful about how we carve this out and get it done. Yeah.
Yes.
Have it make sense. Have it be right. Have it be a plan that actually builds on your organization's strengths. And attainable. Yeah.
I like this topic. I think we should bring it back.
I think there is a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. So much. But it's the weekend, so
So we're not going to talk about it now.
See ya.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
all right, take care. Bye.